Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing Bookish podcast recommendations for you. I often mention podcasts in random videos because I tend to listen to a lot of them. I have about a 1.5 mile walk to work every morning. I tend to use that time to listen to podcasts and I end up listening to a lot of them. And I particularly enjoy listening to ones that are about books because that is what I'm interested in. So I just wanted to give you guys some recommendations in case you aren't already listening to a lot of podcasts or you're looking to branch out. Okay, so the first podcast on my list, these are all really good podcasts, but this one is probably one of my favorites. It's the First Draft podcast by Sarah Enni. She's the host, and there's not a consistent upload schedule, which is unfortunate, but there is a huge backlist of episodes that you can listen to if you're interested in. However often, Sarah interviews a different author, usually a young adult author. Every once in a while, it'll be a middle grade author, but it is like a predominantly young adult author show. So she interviews them all about, you know, where they grew up, when they decided to get into writing, like when they knew that that's what they wanted to do, their process behind writing, and they will also talk a little bit about their books that are either coming out as new releases or books that they've published in the past or like upcoming projects. So it's really fun to just get like an inside look at what the authors have to say and like just to know more of their background, and it sometimes can help you see where they came from in certain stories that they wrote. Some of the audio is a little bit rough in some of the earlier episodes. So my friend Alice recommended this show to me and I went back and I listened to every single episode once she recommended it to me because I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. Like there are so many authors in here that I love. So I listened to all of them and I loved it. Every time that a new one pops up, I'm like, yes. Oh, and she also closes the show with some writing advice. She asks every author at the end of the show what writing advice they would have for anyone who's interested in writing. So this is a good one for anyone who reads young adult books and is also interested in writing themselves. The next Bookish podcast on my list, which is actually my favorite of all of the ones that I'm going to mention, is the Sword and Laser podcast. This is hosted by Tom Merritt and Veronica Belmont, and I just love them. They have such fun banter with one another. They also have the largest sci-fi and fantasy book club on Goodreads. So every month they pick a book. They have people vote in polls to see what book they want to be the book of the month. Tom is the one that pushes for sci-fi, so he is the laser portion of the show, and Veronica is the one that pushes for fantasy, so she's the sword side of the show. And it's really fun because even if you're not reading the book that they chose for the month, they really don't talk about the book for that long. The majority of the podcast, especially in the beginning, is just talking about news in the sci-fi and fantasy genre. So it's a really good way to find out about things that are getting adapted, to find out about new books that are being released, and they also do a bunch of author interviews as well. And again, I just love the banter between the two of them. They're so enjoyable to listen to, and I always look forward to a new podcast from them. The third podcast on my list is Book Hype. If you're familiar with the website Hypeable, they're a very big entertainment website. They talk a lot about books, about movies, about comics, about video games, like pretty much any kind of pop culture that you can think of, they are on it. So Book Hype is a podcast that was started by the girls who write most of like the Bookish articles that are on the site. I can't remember all of the hosts' names off the top of my head. I know there is someone named Brittany. They're also really enjoyable to listen to. They start off the episode by telling what they read that week, what their feelings were toward it. They will also do a book club periodically throughout the year, and then there will be one episode that is a discussion episode where they talk all about that book. They also tend to talk about news that's happening in the book industry, and they also, from like all the time that I've been listening, they tend to focus mostly on new adult books, but they do throw in YA books and middle grade books. And like part of why I'm so interested is because of the news portion that they talk about as well. And it's just fun to hear like what other people are reading. They are very enjoyable and you should check them out. The fourth podcast on my list is What Should I Read Next? And this podcast is hosted by Anne Bogle. This is a really good podcast to listen to if you're into more adult fiction. Every once in a while, she'll have a guest on the show that likes young adult, but it typically focuses on adult fiction. The way that this show is run is that every week Anne has a different guest on the show, and she has them tell her 3 books that they love, what they're currently reading, and a book that they hate. And then based on the books that they tell her, Anne chooses out 3 recommendations of what she thinks they should read next based on what they love and what they dislike. So it's really fun, and it's also really fun to see the amount of times that Anne is able to surprise people with the new books, or if they're already aware of them, then she's like, oh no, and she's trying to come up with other ones to recommend them. So you end up getting more recommendations than just the 3 books that she's recommending, and then you also get insight into different people's favorite books. Typically the people that she has on her show are somehow like involved in the book industry. She had a really interesting episode a couple of months ago. I can't remember exactly when, but she had someone on that was actually opening their own independent bookstore, and it was really interesting to just hear the process behind that and hear like what that person is interested in reading. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. The one thing that can be a little bit annoying is that there are a bunch of ads that are in it. So I typically just will hit like the skip 15 seconds ahead until the ad is over while I'm listening to it. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this one. And then the last one that I'm going to talk about is the Mashable Reads podcast. Mashable often has guest authors come on, and they read a very wide range of books. Sometimes they'll have an episode that is dedicated to one book. Sometimes they'll have an episode that's dedicated to a genre. Sometimes they'll just be talking about news, but they have a really good like mix of topics and mix of categories. Obviously, one of my favorite episodes was the one where they all discussed The Raven Boys, the first book in the Raven Cycle series. I thought that was really fun. There was a girl on it who was obsessed with it like me. There was someone else that was kind of like on the fence about it, and then there was someone else that was like, it was good, but I'm not sure if I'm going to continue. And it was just fun to like hear all of their opinions together on the series that I love so much. So I always look forward to those. So those are like my top 5 favorite Bookish podcasts. And like a bonus one that I'm going to say, which isn't only books, but I've been listening to it for years, is Mugglecast. Mugglecast is run by Andrew Sims, who is... he's one of the top people at Hypable also, but Mugglecast, as I'm sure that you can tell from the name, is a Harry Potter podcast. So not only do they talk about the Harry Potter books, but they talk about all news that's happening in Harry Potter in general, whether it's related to the theme park, whether it's about a movie, whether it's something about Fantastic Beasts or new editions of the books, or just like fan theories that pop up or things that J.K. Rowling says on Twitter. Like anything Harry Potter, they're covering it. They also recently switched back over to a weekly format. They were doing monthly and now they're doing weekly, so that's exciting. But yeah, they're always really fun to listen to, and they've been in the fandom for so long, so they can be a little bit sarcastic about some things, but it's just so enjoyable and they end up being so funny. Sometimes they can say things that are a little bit on the explicit side, so just beware of that. But they're a really fun one to get into. And those are all of the podcasts that I am going to mention today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know any bookish podcasts that you listen to that you think that I might enjoy, because I'm always looking for more. And yeah, that's all that I have for this video, and I'll see you soon in a new one. Bye!